Hi there, it's Fletcher at TCMedia. Actually, you can see I'm not at TCMedia at the moment. We are all following the very important crisis directives by working from home as much as possible. We hope you're staying safe and doing what you can do to prevent the further spread of COVID-19 also. All of us at TCMedia are thinking every day about you, our members, and the municipalities that we serve. We very much miss seeing you and working with you at the studio. We hope we can get back there as soon as possible. In our regular talks about the things we might be offering during this time, a number of exciting ideas keep coming up. One of these ideas is to encourage and support you in producing video content to submit to us from home using what you already have on hand. Primarily your smartphone. Not only would we love to see your videos ourselves, to hear how you're doing and what you're getting up to during this time, but we also want to build meaningful and engaging shows for our cable channels, for YouTube and social media, things that reflect what's happening in our community at this time, while keeping safe distance, of course, from one another. To this end, we've assembled some tips and ideas that we hope will help you get started producing content at home. This video training has several sections, and if you're watching this on YouTube, there are timecode links in the description that point you to different topics, so you can go where you want to using those links. There will also be other links to helpful resources. There's so many resources out there. Here's a brief overview of how this content is arranged. The technical matters that I'm presenting include basic smartphone camera operation, which just might include a thing or two you don't already know about your camera. Audio considerations, stabilization, editing, sharing your content. There's also a section on using Zoom, which is the wildly popular teleconferencing system which can be used to record conversations with multiple people at a distance. It's quite an exciting development. The filmmaking and storytelling topics include some suggestions for subjects to get you started, production planning, shot types and camera moves, composition, plus some editing tips to help you enhance your story. These are things we already know working in the studio, but just reinforcing that. By the way, I'm using an iPhone X, which I bought in 2018, and I just updated to iOS version 13.4. So the demos that I present are using that device, which makes this unavoidably an iOS production type training. But having said that, I recently gave an iOS production training at Panorama City, and there was one person there with an Android device. And after the training, he told me that he was able to follow along on his Android even though I was showing iOS stuff. And there were very few differences, look and feel differences, a few interactive differences, but he could really find his way, so I hope you can too if you're not on iOS. As we know in production, the key to success is persistence and the willingness to play and enjoy the process as much as the outcome. So I hope you're going to be willing to dive right in and give it a try. One more thing before we get started. All of us at TCMedia are very eager to support you in this experiment. So reach out to us with questions and feedback by email or phone. We will respond as quickly as we can, and we might use your questions to fuel additional content like this. Let's talk about subject ideas. We would love to hear about how you're managing the current situation in your life. In particular, about things that provide you with significant hope and that sustain your well-being. Show us what you're cooking for yourself and your loved ones right now. What's your exercise routine? Yoga, meditation. Tell us stories about some specific kindness or generosity or some service that you experienced. These are, of course, the silver lining stories, and they're so great. They help us feel more connected right now. We know, however, that this crisis brings with it very significant challenges and hardships for many. So those are stories worth telling and hearing also. Please share from your direct experience. You might also choose to share your creative work. Read us poems or stories you've written or that you're working on. Play some music, sing a song, do a stand-up comedy routine. Nate. Show us how a knitting project or a painting or a gardening project is coming along. You could read poems or stories that are in the public domain or that you have permission of the author to share. There are so many possibilities when we let our imagination open up. And they don't have to be complicated. Keep it simple. So I mentioned Zoom earlier. It's a very exciting possibility for recording conversations. If you're already a producer of a talk show, you can continue creating your content using Zoom, and we'll be so thrilled to see how that works for you. We want to emphasize that you don't need to create full-length shows. We'd love to receive short pieces from you. It's really a great idea to start simply and build up to more complex ideas and productions. So I'd like to end this segment by saying again how TCMedia can support your productions at this time and how much we want to offer our assistance. We want to hear your ideas for additional content like this. Phone us or email us and we'll contact you back as quickly as we can. If there's anything that comes up, we're really happy to help troubleshoot technical issues, to brainstorm subject ideas with you, to discuss production planning, shot lists, storyboards, lighting ideas, audio strategies, editing, any of the many, many things that might come up as you begin to experiment with home production on your own. If you don't have a file sharing service that you can use to send us files, links to files, we do have a method you can use. So look in this video's description for that info or contact us and we'll help you out with that. This is such a new world for all of us, and there are easily as many opportunities as challenges to be found. We are your community media, and until we can be together again physically, we certainly can support each other in so many ways, even as we keep a safe distance. So on to the technical stuff. Okay, this is the basic camera operations section, and I'd like us to begin by locating the Settings app on your phone. It looks like a gear, and I'm sure you've seen it before. Let's go ahead and click on that. And you should land in the main Settings menu. If you happen to be somewhere else, like maybe you're in your Wi-Fi menu, and maybe you're even in a sub-menu of Wi-Fi, or wherever, you can find your way back using the breadcrumbs at the top of the screen. Notice next to the text in the center at the top of my screen, it says Wi-Fi in blue. If I touch that, I go back one step in the breadcrumbs, and then one more for settings, and now I'm back. That's the concept of breadcrumbs. You've probably seen it before. Anyway, I digress. We want to find the camera setting. So I'm going to scroll down. It's about halfway down my list. You should find it about halfway, perhaps down on your list of settings. It's in a subsection that starts music, then photos, then camera. So locate that and touch it. Hello, touch it. There's just a few things I want to talk about here. The grid is helpful for aligning subjects using the rule of thirds and for composition purposes. So turn the grid on. It's good for you. Trust me. We'll talk more about that later. The record video setting is another thing to pay attention to. I'm using 1080p at 30 frames per second. we would love for you to make that same choice. That's the ubiquitous industry standard for television video. It's also probably the most common in usage for all purposes. It's great for our equipment at TCMedia. It's what we prefer and what we'd love for you to use. You can see other options, of course, based on the vintage and power of your phone, and you'll also see information about file sizes related to the different choices. But again, please use 1080p 30 frames per second. Breadcrumb back. We've also got the slow-mo options here. Depending on the vintage of your phone and so forth, you'll have different options here. I'm using 240 frames per second, 1080p. The file sizes are going to be larger, having chosen that, than if I chose 120. Either of those, frankly, 120 or 240, are going to be fine for beautiful, smooth slow-mo. So if you do want to use some slow-mo, and we'd love to see it, it's awfully cool used appropriately, make your choice there under slow-mo settings inside the camera settings. That's really all we need to talk about in the settings, so I'm going to exit and I'm going to find my camera app, which for me is inside a subfolder called Photography. Your camera app may be elsewhere, but located, it looks like a gray icon with a camera inside of it. Who'd have thunk it? Okay, it usually lives in close proximity to the Photos app, which is where all your photos and video go to live. So click on your camera app and it will launch. I'm going to go ahead and turn sideways at this point. You'll notice more than likely your camera app launched into photo mode. That's the default setting unless you change it. To get to video, simply use your finger to move one place over and now you're in video mode. So you have to pay attention to that before you can shoot video. Now you can start and stop a recording of video by either pressing the record button on screen, the big red button there. I just touched it and now we're starting to see the counter counting up. We also see a little red flashing indicator indicating it's recording. But you don't have to touch that red record button. You can use either the up volume or down volume button on the side of your device. That's a good thing to know in case you don't have quick access to the screen or you don't want to jostle the phone in that way. So I'm going to use the up volume to stop that recording. So either up or down volume will start or stop the recording. So to review what I just shot, there's a little thumbnail you'll notice on the right-hand side if you're holding your phone horizontally, which of course you should for all video shooting. Let me digress on that topic for just a second. You could shoot vertically if you are intentionally doing so. If you're posting vertical video to Facebook, which is more common these days than it used to be, go right ahead, but we're not going to really be able to use that for the TCMedia channels, and it doesn't look great on YouTube either. Facebook, Instagram, perhaps so, but for almost all purposes, go horizontal landscape for shooting video. You'll be much happier, and your audience will be too. Okay, back to the topic at hand. If you want to review what you just shot, there's a little thumbnail below the record button. If you touch it, you enter the Photos app, and you're now looking at what you just shot. And it's actually playing right now. Notice there's a blue arrow at the top left that is, again, a breadcrumb to go back to the camera. So pay attention to those breadcrumbs. You can get right back. Now, I want to point out that you can reverse the camera. Right now, we're shooting the main camera, which is on the back of the phone, and I'm pointing toward my desk there. But if I want to reverse it, there's an icon at the top right of my screen that's a circular arrow like the recycling arrow. If I touch that, it's going to reverse the camera, and there I am. Hello. And there's Riff behind me, by the way. Hi, Riff. Okay, I'm going to reverse back because I'm so easily distracted by things. All right. There's really only one more thing I want to point out here in the basic camera operation, which is focus and exposure, how to lock them and how to adjust them. These devices, smartphones and the cameras that are built into them, automatically detect faces. So if you have a face anywhere in your frame, it's going to find it, it's going to see it, it's going to be aware of it, and it's going to try to lock on it for focus and to calculate exposure. So that's great in most cases. If you want to be intentional about where you're focusing, even if there's a face in the screen somewhere, you have to touch the screen, and you'll notice I'm going to touch on this interesting looking box, which is actually a microphone control box. I'm going to touch on it. And you'll notice that yellow box appeared with a sort of sun icon right next to it, and then it became mostly transparent. That is the place that is now being used as the focus spot, and the exposure calculations are being made based on that box. But it's not locked. In other words, if the sun came out from behind a cloud, because the exposure is not locked, the camera is going to respond to the brighter conditions and adjust accordingly. Likewise, if someone walked into my frame with their face, it would see the face and jump over to focus on them. So how do you lock? Well, you lock by touching and holding for a moment until you get that kind of flash of that yellow box, and you get a yellow text label that says AE/AF lock. That indicates that both the exposure and the focus are now locked on that area. You can adjust exposure, and you can do that whether it's locked or not. Let me show you. If you touch the screen, kind of anywhere if you're locked, but touch and move your finger upward to open the iris and increase the exposure. Everything becomes brighter. So I'm just touching and moving my finger upward to increase the exposure. Downward, of course, decreases the exposure. You might have to lift your finger and do some more scrolling downward or upward, because the exposure doesn't move rapidly, and that's a feature, not a bug. You wouldn't want it to move. Like if I go from bottom of screen to top of the screen, it doesn't move all the way through the available exposure values. You want to have more fine-grained control. So if you notice at first, hey, my exposure is not changing that much, just try lifting your finger and keep scrolling upward or downward on the screen. Notice I'm still locked because I'm being careful not to tap the screen as I'm adjusting the exposure. If I do accidentally or on purpose tap the screen, tap the screen. So I just tapped the screen on the candle base there, and by tapping I'm telling the camera, no, I don't want you to be locked on that microphone control box anymore. I want you to move over to this other area. And notice I'm now not locked either. So again, if a face came on the camera or if I move around, that area that I'm focusing on might change. Something may come closer, and it's going to, because I'm not locked, it's going to try to focus on whatever's in that box. And now I just confused the heck out of it. So anyway, let me just do that one more time. I'm going to lock on the base of the candle by touching and holding. I get the flashing yellow box and the AEAF lock, indicating I'm now locked. Okay, so I think that's all I have to say about basic camera operation. We'll talk more about composition and other matters, lighting and audio and so forth, in other sections, but thank you for your patience. Let's talk about stabilization and camera placement. There are, of course, all sorts of gizmos you can buy to stabilize and position your smartphone or tablet. I'll put a few options up on screen so you can see them. Some of these are quite inexpensive, so if you have a budget of any kind, you can find these easily online and have them sent out to you. But what if you have no budget? I believe that for makers of shows like us, it's definitely the case that where there's a will, there's a way. We see this all the time at TCMedia. I'm betting that some of you will come up with better solutions to this particular puzzle than I did, but let me show you my arrangement. I made a kind of a fun mistake in this setup, which will quickly become apparent as we take a look at this. But as always, mistakes are really useful for learning. First of all, you'll notice that I pushed a table up to a window to take advantage of the natural light on my face as I sat at the table. I then used a cardboard box and some books to raise my phone up to the right level for my chair and to hold it upright. And here's where we see my mistake, which I only discovered after I reviewed the footage. This provides such a great lesson, and that is to always test your setup by shooting just a bit of footage and reviewing it before you shoot for real. This goes for audio and video, of course. If I had moved that book over a bit, or maybe if I used a can of soup or a couple of rubber bands to secure the phone in place, I would not have had the book in the frame like it is. Anyway, you get the idea. If you take a bit of time to arrange your shooting space, it will pay off. Pay attention to where you are in the frame when you sit down. Remember the grid we turned on in the iOS camera settings? Use that to help place yourself and other subjects in the frame. Don't leave too much room above your head. Don't cut off the top of your head unless you're intentionally going for that really close-up look. Don't leave your face in darkness by having too much light behind you or not enough in front of you. Look at the frame edges. Look all around the frame to make small adjustments to improve your composition. Think about it as though you're going to take a still photo and you want to make it the best still photo to send to your friends that you can. This has to do with camera placement and lighting. And all of these same principles hold not just for phone recordings but for Zoom recordings on a laptop. Zoom is suddenly everywhere. Everybody's talking about it and using it, and for some good reasons. It's a very flexible and powerful tool for teleconferencing that allows you to record conversations over the internet if you want to record them. We're not going to go into much detail here in this piece because this is already a long enough video, but here's a quick look. We're certainly available to help you further with Zoom to get it set up, to understand how to use it, and with any other home production matters that come up. So here's a recording of a meeting that Deb and Robert and Care and I had this morning. We recorded a bit of it using Zoom's built-in recording feature. I will provide links to additional Zoom resources, tutorials and such in the description to this video. One more quick thought about lighting. If you're having trouble getting enough light on the scene, and maybe it's a really cloudy, rainy day, or you're shooting at night and you don't have natural light coming in a window, you can use white poster board as a bounce device for existing light. Maybe you've already moved all the lamps you can into position and it's still not enough. White poster board will bounce light in a direction if you have some. If you don't have white poster board, you can make some. If you have a large piece of cardboard or a medium-sized piece of cardboard, you can tape a bunch of sheets of regular white paper on it and make a larger piece of white bounce material. And it really does a pretty good job of filling in shadow on a face, for example. So another small tip on lighting. Carry on. Okay, iMovie Basics. Let's find our iMovie. If you don't have iMovie already on your device, it's free to download from the App Store. Let's launch into it. Hopefully you'll end up in the Projects folder. If you've already used iMovie, you'll have some projects already in there. If you have not, you'll just see the plus sign. Let's touch the plus sign to start a new project. We're going to start a movie rather than a trailer. Touch movie. It then takes you into your photos and videos library. So you can select one or more assets in here. You can select still images as well as videos. You see a checkbox when you've selected something. And once you select those and say create a movie, it's going to go ahead and put those into a project. I'm going to go ahead and go horizontal here to get a little more real estate. But instead of adding these several assets at once, I want to add one at a time to show you how that looks. So I'm just going to say done to this, and then I'm going to say trash and delete that project and start from scratch here. So the plus again, create a movie, and I'm going to start with this 42-second clip here, and that's it. I'm going to place that into the timeline. There I am, and I just want to let you know that you can scrub through the timeline with your finger, just back and forth on the timeline, scrubbing through. And the reason I chose this first video here is because as I play it back, you'll notice that I'm not saying anything, and then I start talking. I washed my hands really well. I'm back. We want to trim the front of this clip to just before I start talking. To do that, we select the clip by tapping it. We then have handles on either side that are trim handles. If you carefully touch and move your finger, well, see, now this is where the frustration begins in iMovie. I didn't actually touch the trim handle properly. I seem to have grabbed the whole clip. I'm going to release it, then reselect it. Now I've got the trim handles. I'm going to try again. Touch the yellow trim handle and start. No, I did it again. iMovies can be a little frustrating. Let's select it. I'm going to try that again. If you're not pretty precise with your touching, so, well, fourth time is going to be a charm here. Okay, there we go. Success. So I'm now, as you see, I'm trimming from the start in to the video, and I want to find the spot just before I start speaking. There it is. I'm just about to talk, so I'm going to let go. So now when I play this, okay, yep, that's pretty much where I want to start it. So as we well know, when we're shooting a show, a lot of times the most basic thing we need to do is just trim the front, trim the back, put in our titles, text, whatever, and call it good. Maybe adjust the volume a little bit. So that's the most basic thing. Now at the end of this clip, I kind of have a miscue. Was that good? Where the dog gets up and I have to go to the bathroom, and so instead of continuing what I needed to do, I had to get up and start over. So let me trim the end of the clip. So here we go. I'm going to try to do the same thing. There we go. I'm trimming the end of the clip. And how about just after I wave? There we go. That's good. So now I've trimmed the in point and the out point of this clip. Now I want to add my next clip. So I'm going to touch the plus button to the left of the view screen. And I can go back into moments. And there are my most recently shot clips. I'm going to choose this other clip of me. Now notice there's a plus. That's just to add it to the project. There's a play to preview it to make sure it's the one you wanted. And there's a ... The ... gives you options of how you want to place it. A cutaway means you're putting it on top of the timeline, cutting away from the primary timeline to show that clip. We're used to seeing that in Final Cut. Picture-in-picture is just what it says. It puts it as a small picture inside the picture. You can actually move it around on screen. It's pretty cool. A split screen obviously is split either horizontally or vertically, and green screen, blue screen is what we know as keying, weather reporting type thing. So I'm going to cancel that because all I really need to do is add it. And we just saw that animation. It added it as a second clip, and it creates automatically a cross-dissolve transition. We can change the transition if we want by touching it. You've got none, which is a jump cut or just a hard cut. Theme means if you've chosen a theme for the overall video, it'll apply the transition associated with that theme. Let's not worry about that for the time being. The cross dissolve is what is sort of default as long as you've not changed the default. Slide is a slide from one side to the other. A wipe is a wipe. A fade is a fade. Let's leave it at cross dissolve for the time being. You can also, you'll notice, change the duration of the transition from a half a second up to 2 seconds. Okay, so let's just leave it at that, and let's go back. Now, this second clip, you'll notice I spent a moment not speaking, and then I cough, and then I should start speaking. Hi. Okay, so we want again to trim to that point, so I select by tapping. Maybe I've got a better hang of this. No, I still grabbed it instead of trimming it. Hey, I'm trimming it right on. So there's the cough, and now I'm down and I'm about to speak, so that seems to be good. And then the end of this clip, hi. I say hi. This is clip number 1. And in this clip, when we get to the end, let me go ahead and scrub toward the end. Oh, I cough again at the end. Isn't that nice? So we want to trim the end so that I'm not coughing on camera. Okay, how about there? Good enough for this example. What else do we see on screen here? With a clip selected, a video clip that is, you can do, when we're in, notice on the far left, we're in the scissors icon. This bottom part we can sort of call the inspector. So we've got various choices. The scissors gives us a menu that includes split, detach, duplicate, or delete. Why don't we take a look at splitting this clip? So let's see. I'm going to put my playhead right in the middle. Then I'm going to select it again. I'm in the scissors. I'm going to select split. And just as you might imagine, right where my playhead was, it has now split. And you'll notice that it put a hard cut or a jump cut or sort of an invisible cut if I play through it. This is clip number 1. And in this clip, I'm going to make a list. So it is a split, but it doesn't show as a split on screen. Obviously, if I went to a different camera shot and used that kind of jump cut, you would notice it. But since it's the same clip, you don't notice it. Why would you want such a cut? You might want to apply a text element to this portion of that clip, but not this portion of the clip. That's why you might put a split inside a single clip. We'll take a look at the text in just a minute. So I want to undo that. Notice on the right there's a curly arrow. If I touch that, it undoes the last thing that I did. If you touch and hold that curly arrow, you can redo things. So cancel that. So good to know. Let's see, there was one thing. Oh yeah, when you select a clip and you go to this next icon next to the scissors, it looks like a stopwatch. This is the retime menu.
And obviously we've got the tortoise and the hare there, so you can slide to slow it down, and you'll see next to the tortoise hare slider that I'm now at half speed, and if I play it back, it's at half speed. So if you have slow-mo footage, this is how you would, execute that slow-mo. You can get it back easily to 1 times, that's always going to be available to you. You can always find your way back to normal, or you can hit reset over to the right, and that'll put you back to the native speed of the clip. You can also put a freeze in there to freeze it, and you can expand how long you're freezing, just like in Final Cut. The audio tab gives you access to a volume slider. That's about all you get for audio sweetening in this version of iMovie. The text gives you access to a bunch of text possibilities, and you'll notice a lot of them are animated, and they're sort of demoing how they look and what they do animation-wise. Let's take a further look at that. I'm going to get out of that by touching away. And remember how I split the clip and I said you can put text in one part of it rather than another? Why again might you want to do that? Well, if this clip is, let's see, this clip is actually 45 seconds. If you're going to throw a title up, you're not going to want it to be on screen for the full 45 seconds of this clip. So what we might want is to go in to the clip just a short way. Like, let's start playing it from the start of the clip.
Hi, this is clip number 1.
And maybe there is where we want. Oh, you know what? That 45 seconds obviously doesn't apply to this clip. It's the whole project is 45. So anyway, what I'm trying to say still applies, I think. Let's touch the clip. My playhead is about where I want the title that I'm going to add to the beginning of the clip to end. So now I'm going to touch the T for text, and I'm going to choose standard. And when I do that, it puts up a variety of text element placeholders, and I can see what it's going to look like. I get this option down at the bottom, center or lower. It's now on center. If I touch lower, then it's sort of like a lower third, or it's exactly like a lower third. So I'm going to go ahead and say center, and then I'm going to touch this main text element, and I can now start to edit it. So I'm just going to put my name in all caps like that, and then I'm going to touch away from that, and now I could touch on some of these others and start to edit them, or I cannot, because we don't want to sit here all day watching me do that. So enough said on that. Notice that there's a little T at the top of the thumbnail in the timeline indicating I've applied a text element. But guess what? I forgot to split it before I did that. I'm glad I did that accidentally, because now I can show you. It's like, whoops, I have the text applied to the whole thing. Well, let's go ahead and split it, even though we forgot to do it before. I'm going to go back over to the scissors after selecting it. My playhead is about at the center where I want it. I'm going to hit split, and now the text is not applied to the second half of this clip, but is applied to the first. So even if you make a mistake on applying a text element, you can still do a split to isolate it to a portion. I think it's the left-hand side or the earlier side of a portion of a clip that you split after the fact that retains the text element, if you understand what I'm saying there. Let's see now. We have done a couple of very basic edits. We've done the addition of text. We've split a clip. Now if I want to change this transition here, touch it, and there's our transitions again. Let me show you what a wipe would look like in this case. Play.
For 1. And in this clip, I'm going to take a list.
That was a silly choice because it didn't do a darn thing. Let's put a wipe over here. How about? And maybe we'll actually get to see it.
That's the end of the show. See you next time.
There's our wipe. Don't like wipes personally. What about a slide? How does that look?
See you next time.
There it is. Okay. I would suggest, you don't have to listen to me, but use cross dissolves or hard cuts. Hard cuts are more in style for quite a while now than even cross dissolves. But it's up to you. Do what you want. Do what you like. Okay, we need to talk about adding audio a little bit here. So I'm going to click the plus. This interface, you'll have to agree, is Spartan. Is that the right word? Minimalist. But understandable, I think. I mean, when you touch something to select it, you get a variety of elements. We didn't look at this this last thing here after the text element. This is where I can change the look of a particular clip, or I can say back to none. So again, we've got that filter effect sort of thing. We've got the text situation there, and I think, are there other things here? No, there's nothing else really there. I tried to slide across. We got the audio, which really only gives you a volume slider, the retime, and the trim, or excuse me, the scissors, which allow you to split, detach. Now detach, we didn't really look at. That's going to detach your audio. Notice as we look at this audio, you see where that transition happens between clips. There's a fade applied. Now that we've detached our audio, I can select either the video or the audio. And if I select the audio and I go into my audio tab, I now have an option that says fade. I can touch fade and I get these little triangle controls. So I've already got a fade associated automatically with the transition on the right hand side. I can use the triangle on the left hand side to create a massive in fade if I want, and I can obviously manipulate that there. So let's see, I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to undo that, and I'm back to before I detached audio from that. Now let's touch the plus again, and let's take a look at some of the options here. So again, I'm back in my photo library, but what if I want to put audio in there? I don't have audio in my photo library, my videos and photos library. So I'm going to use the breadcrumbs at the top, and I'm going to touch back. Here's that original list where I can get to my moments, which is how Photos organizes things by default. I can go to videos, which is going to filter out everything but videos. I can do photos, which does the reverse of that, just shows you photos. I can go to albums if I've been so organized in my own behavior as to create albums in my photo library. Here's audio. What do we find? We find soundtracks, my music, or sound effects. Soundtracks is a variety of royalty-free, copyright-free, I guess, elements that we can use. You can sample them by touching. Turn them off again. And you can, once you've touched one, you can add it with the plus sign. Sound effects are just what you would think. There's all kinds of sound effects to add. My music means if you store things in the quote iTunes library or Apple Music or whatever library, you're going to find that listed there. Let's take an example under soundtracks. I'm going to choose Evergreen, and I'm going to hit plus. Okay, so that added it, and it added it from the very start of my project, and it stopped it at the end, even though if my project were longer in duration, it would have continued, I guess, as long as it has music to continue. I don't know if it's a 2-hour documentary, if it would have, maybe it's some kind of loop or something. I haven't tested that. So now obviously I can touch that and I can start to apply different edits like fades and so forth to this music. What if I want to shorten the music? Well, here's a trim. So notice when I touch trim, I now get the trim handles. So I can trim from the end. One interesting question is, can you trim from the beginning? And the answer is sort of. I'm trimming it, notice, but it's sticking to the end, or excuse me, it's sticking to the beginning of my project. So what if I want this music to not be under this first clip, but under the second half of my project? Well, there is a way to do it. I'm going to touch that audio, and I'm going to go into the scissors, and I'm going to change it to foreground, which I don't know why they call it foreground, but anyway, here we go. It now does that weird bouncing animation, and it's blue. I can now touch it and hold it, and I now have it in my grip, and I can move it and drop it where I want. It is no longer magnetized to the beginning of the project. And I can do more than that. I can trim it in either direction using the handles. Okay, cool enough. Now, if I put it back to background, it's going to go bang and magnetize, didn't actually go bang, but I said bang, and magnetize to the beginning of the project again, retaining whatever length I had it at. So once again, foreground turns blue and allows you to touch, hold, and move audio, whereas the default initial setting for audio that you add is green and it's background. Strangely named, both of those. Duplicate, delete, split. So that's that. Now let's talk about saving and sharing and things like that briefly. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let's just click away from everything. And when you're done, oh, you know what? I didn't show just rearranging things. I'm going to take this last clip here. I'm going to touch and hold it. I now have it in my grip like I did with the audio a minute ago. And I'm just going to travel back through the timeline until I get to the beginning. And I'm going to drop it. And now I've rearranged that on my timeline. Easy peasy. I can undo that. And it goes back to where it was. I could take the one in the middle. Hello, touch it and hold it. And I could move it to the front. Let's do a quick example of adding a photo as a cutaway, okay? So plus, and then notice it took me back to where I last was in this add menu. So I need to follow the breadcrumbs back to audio and then back again to get to this initial list. And let me go into photos. That's sort of sorting. And I'm going to go into my favorites. And I'm going to pick a photo of Riff. And I'm going to hit the ... the ellipses, and I'm going to say cutaway. And it then places it on top of the timeline, like that, like we would expect. And it is a cutaway. And notice that it masks, even though this is a different aspect ratio, a portrait sort of photo up and down, it masked what's beneath it, which is very nice of it. I don't have to fool with that. So as we play through this, obviously, a video that I want to make about the audio beneath will still play, but I cut away to the doggy dog. So I'm going to undo that. Oh, by the way, with this photo, if I select it, there is a sort of a default thing. Well, it doesn't do it if you do cutaway. Let me show you this in another fashion. I'm going to touch away. I'm going to undo the photo add. I'm going to add a still photo, but I'm going to put it in line. I'll put it at the end. Plus, here is a different dog photo, and I'm just going to say plus, which means it's going to add it in the main timeline. Now if I touch the dog picture, notice that there's a kind of a Ken Burns effect that is automatically enabled. See where it says Ken Burns enabled? If I disable that by touching it, hello, there we go. It's now just leaving the photo alone, and if I play through it, it doesn't move. Now this is a large photo. I'm obviously getting the top of the dog's head. If I want to manipulate it in some way, I need to select it. Even though Ken Burns is disabled, I can still pinch the photo with 2 fingers, and it'll allow me to a certain extent to resize it and reposition it. Now there are limits. It's going to bounce to fit the frame edges, so you don't have complete control. I'm going to re-enable Ken Burns, and notice it says there pinch to position the start. So I'm going to go ahead and pinch, and again it's going to bounce to fit the frame edges. But anyway, it wants you to tell it where to start. I'm going to start, it's not letting me do much here. I'm going to start like that, and then notice where there's a blue arrow pointing to the left. I'm going to touch the other arrow pointing to the right. It now asks me to set the end position. So I'm going to actually zoom in, which it will let me do, and I'm going to go sort of to the eyeball. And now I've completed my Ken Burns setup. So I'm going to scroll back in my timeline and play it so you can see. So there's my beautiful Ken Burns eyeball zoom in. So have fun playing with that. I think we can say done. And we can now name this movie by touching the text. And my movie can be Riff. And I could say whatever I wanted to say there, of course. And then, whoops, I just deleted it. Let's try that again. There we go. Say done. Now, obviously here we have, we can throw it away there. We can play it. We can go back in to edit it by touching edit. Or we can hit the share icon. And this is where we get that very complex sharing menu that gives us all the options that we might be interested in. And we've already talked about this, but briefly, when you're sharing video because of the file sizes involved, you typically need, if you're not posting to YouTube or Facebook directly, for example, you need to pretty much use a file sharing service like iCloud or Dropbox or Google Drive, something that will show up in this menu once you set it up and have an account. Like I've got a Drive, I've got Evernote, I've got iCloud has got to be in here somewhere. Anyway, you got to have a file sharing service to share large files. So if you need help with that, we're happy to talk you through it. But for now, we've had enough, I think, of looking at iMovie for the moment. Thanks for your patience again, and give us a call, shoot us an email, and we can help further. Thanks again.